So today is Sunday, March 8th, and it's 7 a.m. Although daylight savings was last night, so it's actually 6 a.m.
Yes, and if I look tired and sound tired, I am tired. Bryn woke up hours ago. I woke up minutes ago.
I actually only woke up like 40 minutes ago. Although what I did was I was like, oh, I have to wake up at 5:30 pre-daylight savings time, which is actually 6:30 daylight savings time. But I set my alarm for 5:30, which is like 4:30. So then I woke up at that time and went back to bed for another hour.
Great.
But then I got up and got ready and woke Michael up to have this podcast, and I really appreciate you. I think he's so excited about the podcast that he's willing to get up at 6 a.m.
Yes.
to record the second one with me.
I am.
And so the reason we're actually recording it at 6 a.m. is because, and really 7 a.m., but 6 a.m. pre-daylight savings time, is because I have this class that I'm teaching this morning, and I just thought it would be a great way to prepare for class is to explore the subject with Michael first. And
Bryn also made us chai, if you can see in here.
I made
Beautiful chai.
Those are black tea bags right there.
We're going to try to have this a lot more. That way we can have some fun with it on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings.
Oh, right, because Michael wants to invite people onto our podcast and then serve them chai.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, I said
sure.
that we need to at least get 10 under our belt of just him and I getting used to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's delve into this subject this morning so I can go back to sleep.
Okay, so I guess I'll preface the discussion by saying that the main source that I've been using for this course is a book called Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anadea Judith. This book is like the Bible of chakras. So it's been really helpful for me to listen to. And then I also want to acknowledge that the way in which Anadea Judith interprets the chakras is very much from a psychological perspective, which is a relatively modern thing with chakras. If we look back towards when chakras are cited in scriptures thousands of years ago, they're not talking at all about the same sorts of things that she's talking about here. They're more kind of cited here and there, and then they're also, I guess they start to come up more through the development of Hatha Yoga. As people are looking more specifically at how do we celebrate our human bodies through the practice of yoga and not just think of yoga as a transcendental science. I think we should take our baby's bone away.
Okay.
Our dog's chewing on a bone right now, and I'm just wondering how loud it's going to be. Not really sure. Poor sweet baby. Anyway, so just saying that the psychological interpretation of the chakras is definitely a newer thing. And it's also very useful. I think she creates a structure for people to have an evolutionary path based on the chakras, based on psychology. And there's so many correlations between the different areas of the body that the chakras are associated with and different types of psychological problems that we have. So I'm just going to pause there and see if you want to add anything.
I will add very little. I listened to this book maybe 2.5 years ago. I listened to a little bit of it the other day on the sixth chakra, and I really enjoy it. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much because I feel like I've heard some psychological interpretations with the chakras, and for some reason it just didn't really vibe with me. And maybe it was because it was Freudian in nature, where they're looking at certain age range. This is infancy, this is 1 to 3 years old, 3 to 5. But I actually really enjoyed listening to it this last time I listened to it recently. And I think that's all I really have to add.
Yeah, well, I'll say that Michael came to the class number 1, and then he's been skipping out on Sundays because that's his day off after having soccer games and stuff on Saturdays. So so now she found the louder toy, the one that actually squeaks. And I have to take this away from her too. Oh, precious. So she's squeaking it. Oh, I feel bad. Okay. So he came back to he came to class 1, got the first chakra, skipped chakras 2 through 5, and then it's okay because he's not, I mean, you know, like you come to my stuff because you're being sweet and supportive, and I totally respect that you need to have your space. Anyways, and then he came back to teach the 6th chakra while I was visiting my friend Andrea in New York. And so then he listened on Audible to the chapter on the 6th chakra, and I think part of the reason that you may have liked it better than the previous chakras is because by the time you get to the 6th chakra and by the time she's defining it, the age range thing doesn't quite apply anymore. Like we just say like 6th chakra is like early adulthood, re-examining the belief patterns that have been laid out for us in our lives. Whereas chakras 1 through 5 actually do have like clear age ranges associated with them, and she's looking at like developmental tasks that are happening during certain age ranges, and how, not to say that like one chakra is never isn't at work at a certain period of time, but she does say that there's time periods where like the first chakra its development is prevalent, and the second chakra's development is prevalent, and the third and the fourth, and so on. And so you guys get to listen in on this, only our second podcast, but this is week 7 for the class, so we're finally up to the crown chakra now.
Yeah, and we're starting with the crown chakra, the big kahuna, the 1,000-petaled lotus.
That's right. So the name in Sanskrit of the crown is Sahasrara, which means 1,000-petaled lotus.
I'm glad that you were pronouncing that and not myself.
It's really not easy to pronounce. I'm sure if Jen was listening to this, she might have some corrections. Jen's our Sanskrit teacher. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's better than average.
Yeah.
Pronunciation.
So I'm curious as to, with the crown chakra, what you've discovered through reading this, let's maybe talk about the book first, and then, I mean, I'm guessing you're going to also weave in your own experience, and we can talk about other teachers and other books and what they say about that experience too. And I think when we think about, can I start a little bit?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. When we think about the crown chakra, we think about the enlightenment experience. We think about, like, again, the big kahuna, or the big thing that happens to us in enlightenment. But it's not necessarily that. And I think everybody's had some experience with the crown chakra, at least, when the top of the head starts tingling because of, your heart opens in some way because you're thinking of your family. And it could even be during meditation or during the visualization that we talked about when you're trying to get into an emotional state. You can start to feel your crown chakra activating in some way. So again, it's not necessarily that, you have to be meditating for a certain amount of time. You have to be at some certain spiritual state in order to experience this. We experience this every day if we notice it.
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is, again, we have to look at which interpretation of the chakras we want to abide by. And when we're looking at Anodea Judith's interpretation, we're certainly having 7th chakra experiences pretty frequently, because she's really just describing like a certain psychological state of being that's pretty elevated. Whereas when we look at like a more traditional yogic interpretation of the 7th chakra, then we might actually describe it as like a type of enlightenment experience.
Sure. Like if we're trying to get to that point, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess so. Although regardless of whatever tradition we're looking at, whether it's modern or classical, any tradition will say that if you have like an elevated crown chakra experience, this is not like suddenly meaning that you're enlightened, like don't worry, you don't have any problems anymore. like no matter what, it's very essential that like we have this experience. It creates a groove in our brain the same way that other thoughts and experiences do, and that groove is weak if we only experience it one time. So in order for something to really become established within ourselves, we have to experience it repeatedly. So like we have to have these experiences of connectedness, which is a big part of the crown chakra, repeatedly for it really to become a part of who we are.
Yeah. And just to bridge off of that a little bit, I enjoy hearing these yogic teachers and these other maybe mystical teachers in books say that exact same thing, that you don't just hit the samadhi state, which is also a term for enlightenment, union, yoking your consciousness to a higher consciousness, absorption, all these different terms. But you don't just hit the samadhi state and all of a sudden life changes. All your worries fall away. Now you have God consciousness. That's not it at all. If you look at these masters in these books that are teaching this, it's a constant practice. And obviously, if we or they are even getting into that state, they're already practicing. It's already a groove inside of their habitual routine that they're doing every single day.
And then another thing, just to add on top of that, this is going back to the Yoga Sutras, so a more classical definition of like looking at crown chakra experiences. Michael mentioned the word samadhi, which can be interpreted to mean different things, but I guess the interpretation that's coming to my mind right now is like a super conscious absorption. And I mentioned in the podcast on meditation that when we describe meditation, there's a point of like extended concentration on one object. And at the samadhi state, there's not a differentiation between myself and the object. And I guess before I go on, I want to say a little bit more about that. Like when I first heard that, like when samadhi is the state in which you and the objects of concentration become one, that sounded like real, like, oh my goodness, like I'm one with the universe. And that can and does happen in a samadhi state. But this happens like on a much more practical, accessible way every single day. And I'm not saying that when this happens every single day we're in samadhi necessarily, but I'm just citing like the way that the mind functions, which is that like the way that the mind actually does understand objects is by extending itself to them. Like for me to understand what this object is, there's a part of me that is already extending myself into it. And another thing is that part of the reason that like I can't have a full understanding of whatever the object is in front of me, I'm touching this little black ball thing, but it gets a lot more interesting when you're actually thinking about it in relationship to a person. Part of the reason I can't have like a clear access to understanding the person in front of me is just because of all of the stuff that's on my own lens. This is a word that Jen, our Yoga Sutra teacher uses, like that we have this way of seeing things, and then we have a bunch of stuff covering it, which is basically our karma, or what yoga calls samskaras, which is just like impressions. Impressions get stored on the mind, and then those impressions are clouding my ability to just clearly extend my consciousness to be able to see and receive the person in front of me. So if I don't have a clear perception of if I haven't cleared all of this stuff off of my lens, then when I see Michael, I'm not necessarily seeing Michael as he is. I'm seeing him as I see him, with all of my projections on top of it. And the world functions off of projections. I mean, it's nearly impossible not to, unless a person has just like cleaned off their impressions and their subjective ideas off of their lens so much. Okay, that was one tangent. Let me go back to what I think I was going to say, if I can remember. Talking about having the repeated experience of meditation, that being necessary. Well, one thing to keep in mind is that the Yoga Sutras describe several different levels of samadhi. So I mean that's another thing, is that like we have this experience, this unitive experience with the object of concentration, and at this point, the object of concentration is usually something elevated, like a deity, or seeing the essence of the divine inside of something like some element like earth or the sun. Anyways, at that point, when we're having the unitive experience, there's so many different levels of the unitive experience. Like it's this gradual peeling away, like initially just peeling away even the label. If I'm focusing on the sun that rises in the sky every day, there's a peeling away even of just the term, the word, the sun, and there's a peeling away of my cultural projections of the sun. And then there's the peeling away of the elemental forces that make up the sun. And these are just like the initial phases of samadhi. And then as we go deeper, we're going more and more to the essence of what a thing is. And when we get like to one of the further points of the experiences of samadhi that can be described, where it's no longer a sun, it's no longer has a name, it's no longer bound by time and space. We're hardly even looking at we're not even looking at the elements that make up the sun. And I think we've even gone beyond the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, consciousness, activity, and inertia, which are the three things that make up everything. Like we've gone beyond all of that just to the essence of this essential consciousness that underlies everything. And that's kind of this unitive experience that yoga talks about so much, that we're all trying to get back towards. And so I've kind of described like the part of a classical interpretation of the Crown Chakra experience. But I think it would be good to look back at, well, what is this slightly more grounded experience of the seventh chakra that you're saying we can have on a daily basis?
Yeah, and to me, when I think about the crown chakra, and I think about certain chakras are more connected to each other than other chakras. And I know someone probably out there's going to be like, what are you talking about? And that's not true at all. But this is just my experience with it. And when I look at the crown chakra in particular, I think about receptivity. I think about receiving from the divine, receiving grace. I think about things like synchronicity and connectedness. And you said, and sort of esoteric things maybe, because we can't really see these things that activate the crown chakra. We can't see love, we can't see joy, we can't see connectedness. We might interpret somebody's communication together as connectedness, but we can't really see it. So I think of the crown chakra I think the crown chakra has a lot of relation and a lot of connectedness to the heart chakra. So that when the heart opens, which is the fourth chakra, and I'm not talking about the heart over here, and for those of you listening, I'm pointing to my left pectoral muscle. I'm talking about the heart in the center of the chest, which is the heart center, or the heart chakra. And it's the fourth chakra. So the fourth and the seventh, which the crown's on the very top of the head, it's visualized as 1,000-petal lotus, which is a lot of petals, which basically the classical interpreters are using 1,000 to say innumerous, that it's you can't count it. So when the heart starts to open in a way, when we start to feel this love and this joy, then we can access the crown. To me, without the heart opening in a way, it's really hard to access the crown, because I look at it like steps or levels, that this is me starting to bridge from the lower three chakras, which has to do with me individually, to the higher three chakras, which has to do with the whole. And when I'm looking at connectedness with the crown chakra, it does usually have to do, this is the way I experience it, when I'm going for a walk or when I'm meditating and I'm thinking about the whole. I'm thinking about how the grass that I'm looking down at starts to connect with the water that I'm looking at in the river. starts to connect with the earth that makes up the bridge and the cars and the people. And I look up at the sky and I realize, wow, this is incredible. I'm having this amazing experience called life in this present moment. And I start to appreciate it. And that's when I start to feel those little tingles inside of my heart. And that's maybe, I mean, this doesn't always happen, but maybe when I start to feel the tingles on the top of my head as well, to a greater or lesser degree.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and I guess even as you're describing taking the walk and connecting into nature, there is a sense of connection. And at that point, it's intellectual, but it's not just intellectual because it's also becoming emotional. And I think just you describing that, it's really important. If we can take the ideas that we intellectually have about interconnectedness and we can actually feel them emotionally. It doesn't mean that we suddenly know it all the way through and through, because I think to know it through and through requires literally having like a unitive experience. But if we start to know it on an emotional level, like that's getting us so much closer to, I guess I don't know. I mean, it's getting us closer to a crown experience. And emotions, I mean, they're such powerful tools. I guess as I say what a powerful tool emotions are, they can also, it's like your emotions and your mind can be both your greatest servant and your greatest enemy.
Yeah.
Because we have to understand how to navigate through them in a way that serves us, instead of thinking like putting all of our marbles into this thought. Is that how you say it? Put all your like just like betting everything on this thought, or betting everything on this emotion, or forgetting in the moment of experiencing the thought and or the emotion that this too is going to pass. And I guess that's the thing too. It's like if Michael, when he has those emotional experiences of really feeling connected, that too is going to pass. But the more that he has it, the more that it becomes, he knows it more deeply within himself.
To me, it reminds me too about what's important. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I get stuck in just the dross of the day of going from one task to the next. And this necessarily isn't a bad thing. I don't think, oh, I'm so unfortunate for this. Oftentimes I like that. But when I go for a walk, when I meditate, when I pause for a moment, when I take a shower and I'm thinking about my day, whatever it is, it helps me to reflect a little bit. And if I can get into those spaces where I'm reflecting in a positive way, on a positive note, well then that's affecting the rest of my day.
Yeah.
If I'm reflecting and it's a negative note, it's got a negative undertone, that affects the rest of my day too. And it's very clear to me when I reflect at night, whether through meditation or journaling or something, that my day has been just a bunch of little negative or positive experiences. And if I've had greater positive experience, well then in my mind it becomes quote unquote a good day.
Yeah.
And if I've had greater negative experiences, it's quote unquote a bad day. Even if I don't want to admit that to myself, that's how I'm viewing it. It's good for me to know that what you said, this too shall pass, on the bad days. I think about that a lot. I think about that. This emotion is going to pass at some point, whether it's today or 3 days from now or a week from now. It'll pass. It'll become more neutral. Things will get more positive. But on those good days, I don't really like to think about that. I do think about it, but I'd rather say, oh, this isn't going to pass. I'm going to be in this state for a long time. And I think that's the delusion also that we can get into when we're talking about Crown Chakra type of experiences of what's reality, what's not reality. And this also has to do with the sixth chakra too. Mm-hmm. But we can definitely become delusional when it comes to grounded stuff. And that's just all the more importance to be lined up in a way or grounded in the other chakras. Unfortunately, none of our viewers got to hear the 1 through 6 chakras. So they have no idea what we're talking about. But that's okay.
Well, so I was just thinking to kind of, yeah, you're going right where I was thinking too, which is one, just going back to Michael's description of ways in which he can connect with the crown chakra in a relatively accessible way. Is he mentioned taking a walk, he even mentioned taking a shower. And the reason I love this is because the thought that's going through my mind is like to really have an authentic crown experience, or say a crown chakra experience that's going to make the state of one's life better rather than aggravated. The lower chakras have to be they have to be open. We have to have gone through the trials of the lower chakras. And not to say that taking a walk is connecting at all with like trials of the first chakra, but what I will say is that the first chakra is connected with the element of earth. And so when the first chakra is out of balance, and oftentimes it is out of balance because people are disconnected from their bodies, the way that we balance it is by getting connected back to nature, getting connected back to the earth element, feeling the sensation of the dirt underneath our feet, going and hugging trees. And then Michael mentioned, and there's way more ways to do it too, and then Michael mentioned a shower, which is connecting with the element of water. So the element of water is the element of the second chakra. And so he's actually just saying that like he can have these crown chakra experiences by tuning into the strengths of the other chakras. That the experience of the crown chakras is totally dependent again upon the opening and the availability of the lower chakras. And so I mentioned just a moment ago, like the only way you can really have an experience of the crown chakra that's not aggravating as opposed to balancing is to have the lower chakras open, is to say that like people can have crown chakra experiences, but if you have no grounding, if you have no sense of reality, which comes from these lower chakras, and by reality, I don't mean like the underlying reality of connectedness. I mean like the physical reality, the way we experience this world in a dual way. The fact that there's me and there's you and there's boundaries and I have an edge to my physical body. If a person doesn't have that as a foundation before they're having these crown chakra experiences, it's like a disembodied spirit. And if they may keep pushing themselves toward having crown chakra experiences, they're actually pushing themselves further and further into a state of disembodiment, which can lead to states of delusion or psychosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like that's what drugs can do.
Exactly.
If we're not doing the work here on a day-to-day basis of, turning negative into positive, of meditating, of being mindful, of being kind, of being responsible, of being productive, those types of qualities, those positive qualities, if we're not honing those, and we decide that we want to go on a bunch of acid trips or whatever it is. I've been watching the Grateful Dead documentary on Amazon, so that's what I'm thinking about is acid trips right now. If someone were to go on a bunch of acid trips, you can literally lose your mind. You can go crazy, and that's definitely been documented and happened plenty of times in the past. So we want to make sure that we're doing the work here physically, that we're doing it emotionally, we're processing things, we're doing it mentally, we can be the observer, we don't have to be attached to our actions in a way, or at least we can start to see, wow, this is my action, this is my thought, and this is me. Those are different things. Just because somebody says a thought, says a thought, and you may not like it, well, it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily like the person. It just means that you disagree with their thought. So separating the thoughts versus the actions of a person versus the essence of the person is a really important thing. And to be able to do this with yourself is even more important and even harder.
Let's hold that thought because I have to go to the bathroom.
Oh.
So we're back. I had to take care of some root chakra needs before I could really connect into the crown chakra.
Oh, good.
And now I feel so much better. Okay, tell me the last thing you said.
I think that... Were you just talking?
No.
Okay. I know it was about connectedness. I don't remember.
Okay.
Maybe I should do some memory exercises.
I had been commenting on like the other grounding elements. Oh, I think we were talking about the Grateful Dead, and you were talking about like the psychosis experience, and so this is something that really does happen quite a bit, that people will take drugs and it will open up their upper chakras, and they'll be so like captivated by the experiences that they'll just want to live in that reality.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it becomes very much an unreality because it's not coupled with the truths of each of the other chakras. So one of the things I describe in my class is that like each chakra has a truth, a perspective, a reality that needs to be embraced and understood. And then once the reality and the truth of each chakra is understood, we can say that it's relatively open. And then that provides the foundation to move up to the next chakra and the next and the next and the next until we get to the 7th chakra. But the thing is that like the reality of the 7th chakra isn't really true until we've done the work from all the previous chakras.
Yeah. So I know that book bridges into connectedness. Is there anything else that you found would be kind of a key word for the crown chakra that you want to talk about?
Well, so let me just think about some of the exercises that she actually suggests that a person does. And I think I did 3 of them yesterday while I was journaling. So one of them is on developing the witness capacity. Another one is on like your image of a higher self or a God or a deity, and having a conversation with that higher self and being able to like see life from that higher self perspective. And then another one was a meditation that I did with you. You and I did that together yesterday, and that was like the stripping away of all of these different identities. And I think there was another one, but I'll remember it here in a little bit.
I think that it would be good to explain what the witness is.
Yeah, for sure. So, the way that she actually facilitates this exercise is for us to think of a situation that's challenging for us, that gets us emotionally charged. And so then you can do this either sitting with a person or you can do it journaling. And I went ahead and did it journaling. But to think of the situation, put it in your mind's eye, and then as you're putting it in your mind's eye, like actually picturing it like you're watching it on a television where you can hit pause. You can hit pause and you can kind of stop and you can look at the scenario. And so I think that's the main thing. That's the tool that she gives in the exercise to actually go back towards witness, is you're looking at you're looking at the situations in your life, but instead of being in them, you're watching them. But here's the tricky thing about this exercise, and I had to notice this myself, is like, okay, I'm thinking about a difficult scenario. And as I think about the difficult scenario, I actually stopped journaling for a while, started talking to Michael and was like, I can't believe that such and such and such and such and such and such, and so then I oh my gosh, I just got totally sucked back into the drama of this scenario. And so then, but although I will say that as I said that, Michael and I started exploring different perspectives on the situation. And so here's one of the things that came to my mind as we were exploring it, is that when we really if I look at a difficult situation and a situation that may have been occurring for decades now, would you really trade the person that you are now in order not to have experienced that difficult situation? Because as we talk about it, it's no, I wouldn't take back anything about who I am. And much of our strength of character actually comes through difficulties that we experience through other people. And so then that was really like the big takeaway for me was that people's this word inequities, inequities. Another person's inequity can be as much a gift as another person's kindness. And I mean, it totally depends on how we decide to respond to it. And so I guess I feel like the witness consciousness can lead to these deeper realizations, is that let me step back from the scenario, let me look at like the person that I am now. Although even that, I guess this is kind of more of like a functioning as analysis of the situation.
Sure.
So let me go back a little bit back towards the witness. So, I mean, that was kind of how I got there in a roundabout way. It was first like recognizing the goodness from the situation. Although as we go in the exercise, it's like while you're doing it, say, I'm writing about the experience, and then I notice a point where I start to get emotionally charged, and I hit the pause button. And in that pause button, it's like stepping back from the situation and actually observing what's going on inside of my physical body. Like, what's she doing? How is she tensing her muscles? What's her facial expression? What types of emotions is she experiencing? Is there heat in her body? What are the physical sensations? What is the environment like around her? So there's this attempt to create objectivity where it's like somebody else is looking at it, but they're not having the same emotional charge that the characters in the situation are having.
So you're just explaining. I once had a criminal justice teacher say to me that if there was a crime committed and there could be 1,000 people around, that there'd be 1,000 different stories. Even though we all saw the exact same thing, we'd still have 1,000 different perspectives on what happened. And it seems to me that's because there's a lot of factors, but mainly because we attach some sort of label onto it. So for the witness, what I hear you saying is that you're stepping back, almost like a spirit out of your body, and you're saying, oh, she's experiencing joy in her heart, she's experiencing anxiety, or excuse me, I shouldn't even say that. Wow, I'm already labeling it. She's experiencing a tingling in her heart, she's experiencing something in her stomach, fluttering in her stomach, she's experiencing heat in her body, rather than saying she's joyful and yet she's nervous on how to take the next step or something like that. So we're not going straight away into labels, because it's really easy for us to do that because we've done that our entire life. You know, we're interpreting our feelings all the time. And you've done it for years, and I've done it for years, and everybody's done it for years. So when that starts to happen to another person, especially when we're connecting with another person, they start to squirm a little or whatever, we might say, oh, that person's nervous. But we really don't have any idea if they're nervous, and maybe they're a little bit, but they're probably a lot of other things too. So it's important when we go to interpret any sort of situation that we attempt to have this witness type of mentality. And even just in practicing, it helps us to get better at doing it. I don't think the very first time we go and we say, okay, I'm supercharged right now emotionally, but let me just step out and let me witness this from a different perspective. And all of a sudden we go, oh, this connects to this, this connects to this, this connects to this. Problem solved, I'm done, no more emotional charge. I can flip that negative to the positive. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Not great. Because all of a sudden what you've just done is swept things under the rug. And I know this from a lot of experience. This is something that I've been very, very mindful of not to do, and to stay with the negative emotion, actually. Because that negativity, it's like if you just keep going into that darkness more and more and more, all of a sudden you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You start to, the light, the experience brings some sort of result to it. At some point, it may take days, it may take weeks, but we can walk through that negative experience and learn something, I think, a lot greater, because we're paying more attention than to positive experiences usually. If we're having a positive experience, it's like, woo, this is fun. You know, I just want to be in this emotion. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. But even that, too much of that, you know, too much of roller coasters at Disney World, and I'm puking. Turns into a negative experience.
Yeah.
Fast.
Oh, our baby just popped her head up. Oh my gosh, let me just bring her up so everyone can oh, she's trying to run away. Come here, baby. Come here. Come here, sweetie.
This is going to happen every podcast, probably.
Probably. She's so precious, and you just love her. Okay, so going. Okay, let me go back to. I mean, thank you for initiating these good questions about what I actually want to talk about the crown chakra.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the witness, and I just want to contextualize a little bit more. Like, why is the witness important for the seventh chakra? And maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not. Although when we're talking about having these experiences of really feeling like the underlying essential identity of connectedness, that we are all coming from the same place, then it seems natural that we would also have this more objective perspective on the world, which is akin to the witness consciousness, which is also, as I was describing earlier, when we're having deeper states of meditation and we're having a unitive experience with an object, it means that we don't have like all of our own biases on top. Like when I'm focusing on something, I don't have all my biases about who I think you are and all of that. Mm-hmm. And which actually makes me want to say too that it seems like it's being able to have the samadhi experience means that a person has already like cleared off a lot of their biases.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, because I hear that people can be very disciplined and have unitive, or they can have like these like mental experiences, but still come out and be kind of sideways or...
Yeah, but I think we're talking about something different, which you have these unitive experiences. You already said that there's different levels to samadhi. Mm-hmm. And that I think that certain levels, maybe, again, this is my own thought on it, you can hit certain levels without having to necessarily clear all the other chakras out and be a perfect person. That you can hit those levels of samadhi and have these great experiences and even develop what are called siddhis or powers. You know, we think about supernatural powers like telepathy or psychometry or certain things like that telekinesis maybe. You know, and I don't know if those things exist necessarily. I haven't had anybody necessarily prove them to me, and I don't really care about that. But there are people that supposedly develop these powers, and they have a fall from grace. And in the Yoga Sutras, in a lot of books, a lot of teachers of mine have told me too, that we need to actually ignore these types of things that happen. Because all it does is it bolsters up the ego. Mm-hmm. And once it bolsters up the ego, and you do something like that where you're showing a power, kind of like Sai Baba nowadays, he takes he's giving people all kinds of jewelry and stuff. Like he shakes his hand.
And materializing it out
and
of
it materializes out of his hand, and he gives it to a person. Now again, I don't know if that's a magic trick or if it's actually happening. But what I'm saying is he has a ton of followers. And whenever people have a ton of followers, it's seems like extremely easy for them to fall from grace, to have some sort of sexual encounters with women or men, whether it's a male or female, or to be corrupt in some way, to be stealing money. I just watched that documentary on Bikram, who was doing all of the above. So I feel like once people attain some sort of power, again, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be them moving stuff with their mind, but power in their speech, power over people, power to do something in the world, it's even more important that the disciplines that they've had stay there. And that's something that Baba Hari Das taught us, that his students continue to learn, is that, and Baba Hari Das, our teacher that we mentioned on the last podcast, He left his body in
18.
2018, yeah.
September 2018.
I was going to say last year, but it wasn't last year. September of 2018, and he was a cave yogi who didn't speak for over 65 years. I mean, just an incredible example of a person who, even though he's reaching these incredible states, he was very wary about, distance with other people. He wasn't necessarily going up and giving people hugs and doing one-on-one conversations behind closed doors either. He was very, I feel like, aware of what could incite desire in some people, of keeping distance and knowing that he didn't want to fall into the same trap as of a bunch of other yogis that he saw in his past, which is documented in his autobiography, fall into. It just seemed like in that autobiography, one after another, things were disproven from these other yogis. It's amazing. So yeah, I wanted to kind of segue into that part of things.
Yeah, and I feel like that goes back again to the idea of really opening up the crown chakra necessitates evolution in all the other chakras.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of Baba Hari Das. There are like really two main teachings that he had. And one of them was to do regular sadhana. Sadhana means your daily spiritual practice, which includes meditation, and then it often includes breath work to get the body into a state of meditation and maybe some asana, which is the yoga movements, and some reading. So he said, do regular sadhana and basically, in so many words, be a good person. Because being a good person means that we have to address our relationship to the world. He also has a wonderful, 4-line statement. It's
work honestly.
Yeah, work honestly, meditate every day, meet people without fear, and play. And I feel like that's covering as well, again, the idea that we have to address all these areas of our lives. And it can happen, I'm totally speaking of myself, like a feeling, I remember I went to get a Reiki treatment, for the first time when I was living in Brazil. I was 22 at the time. And I was having so many health problems. But the girl did a Reiki treatment on me, and she's like, man, your 5th, 6th, and 7th chakras are so open. And your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd are just all over the place. They're just not even there. And so then that was kind of the first time I was even really thought about it in those terms, that I had all of this energy that had been directed into my upper chakras. I was thinking about spirituality all the time. We both have said that we wanted to renounce the world, and I didn't care about having a job and making money and providing for regular things in the world. All I cared about was just having some type of experience with God. But the thing is, at that period in time, and I wasn't aware of it, I'm diverting all of my life force energy to my upper chakras, and it's, in a way, it's a form of escapism, because I don't know how to deal with the regular problems of daily life. And the thing is that I was experiencing so much depression at that time, because I could see that there was a lot of misalignment. It's there'd be other ways where I'd be acting compulsively because my first chakra was really out of balance. It was ungrounded. I hadn't even established my sense of survival within the first chakra. So
yeah, and I think what you're talking about too, I don't want to get too much off on a tangent, but you're talking about adolescence, really, when you're 22 and trying out new identities. So I think that's a really important time for us to go through. We try on different identities. We get really obsessed with those identities, or we get really identified in those identities. But eventually, we let them go in some way. It's not that you're going to be, nowadays, thinking about spirituality all the time and living up in the clouds while not wanting to have any responsibility. Because you figured out that, I'm speaking for you, I figured out, people figure out that we have to have responsibility. If we want to get into those elevated states and make them more permanent in a way,
pure,
or more pure in a way, absolutely, then we have to do the grounded work, the day-to-day things, the day-to-day tasks. We have to go through our life, have these trials, have ups and downs, and integrate them into us, into our body, mind, spirit, all of that in some way while we think of our highest good as well. And what you said with Baba Hari Das about being a good person, I've also heard him say, build positive qualities. And that's what speaks to me. If I can focus on being kind to people, if I can focus on playing and experiencing joy in the world, even though I'm at work, quote unquote, I don't really feel like I have a job nowadays.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more of not even a career, a vocation. That's the word that I'm thinking of. A calling in some way. That stuff with yoga, whether it's asana or whether it's a private or whether it's meditation or cool class that we're doing this 12 weeks, which is the Artist's Way. Like, that's amazing. Those are things I would be doing even if I weren't paid to do it. So I hardly call that quote unquote work. And then with soccer, that's another thing that brings me so much joy to coach kids soccer. Again, something that I would do without getting paid. I just enjoy those things. I totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I'm going off on too much of a tangent. Sorry, guys. But I guess what I'm saying is we build positive qualities. This gives us the discipline every single day and the groundedness to be able to experience those 5th and 6th and 7th chakras opening, so that, also we have the 4th, the bridge, the heart chakra opening. We have the solar plexus open. We have the spleen open, hopefully, or the sacral chakra. And we have the root chakra open, so that we can experience this connectedness. And I think that's where we're going with this whole thing, is that the connectedness that we're talking about, when you truly feel connected to another individual, to everything around you, that it's the alignment from the root chakra all the way up, all the 7 chakras, to the crown chakra. And you experience joy or bliss or happiness or unity. It could be as high as that. That's the connectedness for me that I experience every once in a while, where I'm like, man, yeah, let me get some more of that.
Thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
I think we gotta wrap it up.
We gotta wrap it up. Wow. Okay.
It went by so
chakra.
fast. It's already been like almost an hour.
Wow.
So.
I'm awake now. I'm not ready to go to bed. I'm ready to talk about all the other chakras.
I know. So
Yeah.
am I. But there's a big pile of dishes waiting for you. And a walk for
That's
this
right.
little baby.
That's right.
She just hit her mouth on the glass table.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. Again, this is our 2nd episode, and it's on the crown chakra. I don't know what we're going to talk about next time, but the next one will come to you this weekend. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye.